Brian Schultz, and I am the construction trades manager here for Grand Rapids Community College. And I'm not sure I like the word housed at the MTech Center, but that's where I work, yes. And if you've not been to the MTech Center, it's on the southwest corner of Grand Rapids, right off of Market Street on Godfrey. And I suggest that you all come over there and take a look at that facility sometime, and I'll be going over some of the programs that we offer here in just a little while. I'm also a member of the Sustainability Council. Grand Rapids Community College is part of a sustainability community partnership with Aquinas and Grand Valley Community College in Calvin, and about now 110 businesses that have joined that partnership in the Grand Rapids area, all designed to promote sustainable practices within their own companies or schools. So a little bit of history here for me. I started here in Grand Rapids about 6 years ago with Associated Builders and Contractors. And they're an organization that is primarily concerned with commercial contractors. And at that time, there was a lot of interest in LEED certified commercial buildings in the Grand Rapids area. It got to the point where we actually set up an award for the best LEED building being constructed through ABC members. And then I left ABC and I came to the community college. And the very first year I was here, we looked at starting a job training program in construction. And that job training program was to go out and build homes in the community. And we formed a partnership with Habitat to build those homes. And so one day I'm sitting there with Habitat and I said, listen, we're going to build these homes for you. Why don't you look into the possibility of building a LEED certified home? Habitat had never done that before. And my association with the LEED organization here, I thought that would be a good fit. We ought to not be just going out building ordinary homes. Let's go out and build some energy efficient homes. And so Habitat thought that was a very good idea. Wasn't that expensive to do, and so we started building LEED certified Habitat homes about 2.5 years ago. And I'll talk more about that later. But before I get into this too far, I'd like to know who you are, so I can kind of tailor this as much as possible to your needs and wants and what you're hoping to get out of this presentation. So I'd like to know is your name and where you're from and kind of why you came to this tonight. What do you hope to get out of this? Can we start right here?
That way, and I'm here with Chris, Hannah, and Rick.
Okay.
We're a manufacturer of wood style mill doors
In Grand Rapids? And have you been to anything pertaining to green building before?
Some fringe stuff, but we're just trying to learn as much as we can.
Okay.
Mike DeVort, residential home builder. Started building an ICF home. Just interested in being to the Greenbelt Michigan.
You want to say what ICF is for those who might not know?
Concrete form home.
Okay, an insulated concrete form home. All right.
Buzz Hopefler from Standale Lumber, just learning more about the Greenbelt and Leeds, and glad to see our Corona door supplier here.
Okay, Standale Lumber. How about next row here? Doesn't matter. Okay. For engineered log homes? There was just an article in, I think, Mother Earth News about green log homes recently. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was that one. I'll check. I just read it, though.
My name is Chris Knaud. I'm with Great Lakes Insulating Systems. I'm part of our company's part of the Greenbelt Council for the HVA, and I'm learning a lot about it. We participate in LEED projects and do a lot of Energy Star thermal bypass education, being the installation contractors, and often getting that call too late to help them meet their thermal bypass requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Know what those are. So I'm really interested in seeing how you compare all three. I know bits and pieces of all of them.
Yeah, so do I. Hopefully we know different bits and pieces. Okay. And your interest is? Okay. Let's do over here. Mm-hmm.
having worked through the process, our standards are also over 50% land preservation. I gradually came close to the fact that my requirements were so consistent with some of the other structured commissioning organizations that I've been aligning myself with lead age
With who?
and formalizing that. As the developer, I'm offering to pay each homeowner, reimburse each homeowner if they achieve lead age silver as an incentive to take the lead age path.
And where is this development?
Sutton's Bay.
Sutton's Bay.
Peninsula.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I've been there many times. Okay. Okay. You're a homeowner? Okay.
Ben Broughton in Muskegon, looking at putting together a 25,000 square foot recovery center and hoping to be as green as possible.
Okay. Yep.
Nate Tunney, graduate student out of Grand Valley, and we feel we work with a professor whose main interest in Energy Star and the other voluntary compliance programs like that. Just trying to get a little information.
Okay. Well, we have quite a wide variety of backgrounds and interests here, from people who know relatively nothing about green building to people who sell products for it and people who are actually building buildings already using those standards. So my understanding was this is going to be kind of a green group, but some of you are not quite as green as I had thought we would be here. So I'm going to start off by trying to just take a look at some of the different rating systems that are out there, how they came about, how they compete with each other in some cases, why you might choose one over another. And anybody in the audience that has any information beyond what I know about these, you're welcome to pitch in at any time and give me some pointers here. So with that, I'll get started. We'll go over these three primary rating systems and look at a couple of other ones. And then I get the impression that most people are interested in what it means to build a green home or a green building. And I am a trainer for Greenbelt Michigan, and I have my materials here for that, and I'm going to kind of use some of those materials to show what a greenbelt home looks like. And then from there, we might even take a look at some of the habitat homes that we are building. And then we can discuss whatever you'd like to discuss after that about LEED or Greenbelt or Energy Star or any of those different organizations. That sound reasonable? Anybody want anything else out of this presentation other than that? Okay, let's get started. All right, we'll start with Greenbelt Michigan. Greenbelt Michigan is relatively new on the scene compared to some of the other ones. It is a nonprofit organization that was established in 2002. In actuality, it was established before 2002. We live in an area that's kind of unique around the rest of the world. If you've done any traveling to other locations, you'll come back and discover that there's probably more green building activity going on in Grand Rapids, Michigan than anywhere else. And there's some reasons for that we're going to get into. One of them, though, is that back in the 1980s, the gentleman who is currently our instructor on our LEED habitat homes started one of the first green building companies here in Grand Rapids. His name is Dwayne McIntyre. And you may have heard of McIntyre Builders. That's the company that he started. And he started McIntyre Builders with the notion in mind that we could build houses much more energy efficient, much healthier, much less harmful to the environment, and cost effective, and build a company on that premise at that time, which he later sold to his cousin. But in the process of starting that company and being a very active member of the Home Builders Association here in Grand Rapids, he and a group of other individuals developed a set of guidelines for the Home Builders Association that later became virtually the national standards. The national HBA took those standards, looked at them, revised them, and in 2006 adopted them as the national standards for the Home Builders Association. So the purpose of Greenbelt, Michigan is to educate builders and the general public of the benefits of green building. I go around to the different HBAs around the state and I put on Greenbelt training presentations. And invariably, what I hear is that nobody out there wants to buy them and that they're not ready to jump in and be a Greenbelt member and start selling something that nobody wants to buy. Then on the other hand, I go to presentations and I hear customers, people that want to buy houses, saying, there are no Greenbelt builders and nobody can build a house like I want it to be built. And it's really a situation where the supply and the demand have to be kind of created simultaneously. And it's hard to keep those in balance. I mean, we could go out and train 50 builders to be Greenbelt builders, but there would probably be more builders than there would be market for it. On the other hand, we could go out and train the general public what it means to buy something that's green in the terms of housing, and they would go out and be asking for houses to be built that nobody knew how to build. So you've got to kind of create that supply and demand simultaneously and try and keep them somewhat balanced, and that's a tough one. These homes are voluntarily certified, which means that the builder gets with a rater, and we're going to talk about raters in a minute, and before the house is ever built, you go over what it means to make that house green. There's a rating system. We're going to look at one of these rating systems. And it is predetermined before the builder starts building the house what it's going to take to rate that high enough to get a green rating. Now, under Greenbelt, Michigan, you can get 3 different ratings of green, and the same is true of LEED. And most people are shooting for the very lowest one, and then we go to silver, and then we go to gold. And it's a little confusing because not all rating systems use that same color scheme or metal scheme for what it means to be a silver rated. So you get with this rater and you decide what you're going to do to make this house green. You then start building this house, and the rater is checking to make sure that it's been built to those standards. What you don't want to do is have a house built and then call a rater and say, all right, I got this house and I just finished building this house and I want you to come take a look at it and I want you to tell me if it rates green or not. That's a tough thing to do because most of the things that make it green, or a good portion of them, are now hidden, and the rater has no way of determining them. So it's a system where the third-party verification by an official rater. Now, before we go any further here, these official raters come from a couple of other organizations. I'm going to throw a lot of acronyms out here for you, and I don't have any overheads for this. The first one is called ResNet, which stands for the Residential Energy Services Network. And it was established actually way back in the 1980s. And it was established initially when we first had our first big energy crunch, and everybody was trying to do everything sort of green back then. And the mortgage companies were interested in loaning money to people to build homes that were energy efficient. However, there was no standards as to what that meant. They felt if they were going to loan money so that you could build an energy efficient home, that there had to be some standard that home met. So that was the very beginnings of the ResNet organization. It really came into being in 1995, and it has been adopted by every organization that we're going to be talking about here. If you want to be a rater for any of the rating organizations like LEED or Greenbelt, you will have to go through ResNet. And when you go through ResNet, ResNet is the organization that oversees the application of what's called HERS, which stands for the Home Energy Rating System. And HERS was developed with the Department of Energy back in the early 1990s, and it went into first effect in 1993. And HERS is really the basis of virtually all of these rating systems. It is the science and the technology behind how you rate a home to determine whether it's energy efficient and green in its usage and construction. So that's where the third-party verifications come in. So Greenbelt is actually another level on top of ResNet and HERS, and we'll look at that in a second here. So Greenbelt Michigan has a checklist, and this checklist is divided into 7 main areas. And you can see these 7 different areas here. First one is lot preparation and design, which has to do with where you're building that house. You get points, for example, if you build a house in what's called an infill site. And an infill site is typically where we build our habitat homes right now. You'll drive down streets in Grand Rapids and there'll be a row of houses and there'll be a break where there's an empty lot between houses. That's called an infill site. It's a site that's already there. It already has access to utilities, to water, to electric, to different energy sources like natural gas. So you get points if you build there as opposed to going out in the country and taking a 1-acre parcel of a 50-acre field and building a house there. You don't get any points for that one. So we're trying to use land that's already been used for housing or could be used for housing and doesn't have any other applicable use. That's one of them. Another one under lot preparation and design is can you orient that house so it can take advantage of a passive southern solar exposure. You get points for that. You get points for designing that site so that when the house is being constructed, you do as little damage to the existing plant life that's already there. In fact, even to the point of defining where the vehicles that come onto that site can drive so that they are not compacting the soil on that site. So there's points to be gained for lot preparation and design. You'll see when we get to Energy Star that Energy Star does not look at that. That is not part of their rating system. Second one is resource efficiency. Energy efficiency, obviously, how that house is going to be insulated, what kind of fuel it's going to use to heat the house, whether it's going to be air conditioned. Same with water efficiency and conservation. Indoor environmental quality. If you take a survey right now of home buyers, there's 2 things that they're primarily interested in buying a house. One of them is indoor environmental quality, air quality in particular, and the other one is energy efficiency. Those 2 always come out pretty even on the top of the list. And then after that we have a manual for the operation, maintenance, and education of the homeowners. And that is also not part of Energy Star. And this operation, maintenance, and education manual is really about simple things that you can do within your own lifestyle to be much more conservative in the way you live and use less energy, use less water, use fewer resources, plant grasses that don't require mowing every day. That one seems to be a hot topic right now. I hear more people talking about the amount of time and energy it takes to mow grass than anything else. And it's also kind of interesting to look at most riding lawnmowers and most push mowers. Those engines on there, even though you don't use very much gasoline in a riding mower, they are very, very polluting compared to an automobile. The automobile engine has gotten to a point where it runs relatively efficiently, but most of our small engines have not gotten to that point. And so you take this little tiny lawnmower engine and you say, oh God, I'm only going to burn a couple gallons of gasoline, but it's equal to about 100 gallons of gasoline going through your automobile because of the polluting aspect of it. I just read the other day that there's a proposal underway to put catalytic converters on all small engines because of the amount of pollution that they create and carbon. So there's just different things you can do like that. If you got kids, probably the worst thing there is for energy efficiency in homes is children. And I'm sure all of you have experienced that. I mean, I had 2 sons of my own, and trying to get them to, my one son in particular, when he was probably about 12 years old, if he could get away with it, he would go in the bathroom and turn on the shower, close the door and all the windows, and see how much steam he could create in the bathroom. And he'd be in there for an hour doing that. You know, just little things like that. You're always yelling at your kids about not closing the door, you know, and things like that. But it makes a big difference. And then the last one is global impact. How much carbon are you saving? For example, they're talking now. I was just at a meeting with LEED a few weeks ago. LEED is trying to get so that if you build a house to a LEED certified standard, and most LEED homes and Greenbelt homes produce about 40% less carbon, that you should be able to own that carbon and trade it on the open market. And they're about yay close to getting that through. Is that right? I see you nodding your head. So now another incentive for you to build a green home is that you get to own the carbon savings from that home and sell them, just like companies trade carbon futures. So that would be a good plus. Okay, so let's look at LEED. LEED was created in 1994. So you can see it came about 10 years before Greenbelt did, by the U.S. Green Building Council. And one of the 2 founders of LEED was at Aquinas College, or was Calvin College, a couple of weeks ago. And while he was there, he said that since January of this year, more companies have joined LEED since January of this year than all companies that have partaken in LEED since 1995. So since January of 2007 till now, more companies joined LEED than joined it in all the years prior to that. So things are really kind of taking off with that. There's some people who question how green some of these companies are that are actually joining them, but at least it's a start, you know. It is truly the nationally accepted benchmark for the design and construction and operation of high-performance green buildings. And LEED is a little different in that the process, I think, is more closely scrutinized and reviewed than the other certifying organizations. Greenbelt does look at their standards and review them and change them, but LEED's been at it a lot longer, and I think they're a lot better at it at this point. One of the reasons LEED is so popular in Grand Rapids is when LEED was first proposed, the founders of it wanted to find a major U.S. company that would sponsor the whole concept of green building. So they kind of put together their idea about LEED and their standards, and they went around the country to all these different major corporations and tried to get somebody to buy into it and say, yes, this is the way of the future, this is what we want to see happen, we agree with this, and we're going to support it and promote it. And after doing this for about a year, they landed at Herman Miller. And Herman Miller was one of the founding, if not the founding company that started the LEED organization on its way to the recognition that it has now. And after Herman Miller bought into it and started promoting green building, Hayworth and then Steelcase joined in, the Wege Foundation, which is part of Steelcase, supported it. And so you had LEED really concentrated here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So much so that right now, per capita, we have the highest number of LEED certified buildings in the United States. It's a lot of them. In fact, you probably can't point to a commercial building that's built around here now that isn't built to some sort of LEED standard. We were just at Zealand Farm Services last week for a presentation there through the Sustainable Business Forum. And we're in this brand new building, and you walk in and the first thing you see is their LEED silver certificate hanging right there on the wall. And it's probably not a place that you would think would be interested in LEED, but they're very much interested in making sure that all their buildings and products meet LEED certifications. So the checklist for LEED looks very much like the checklist for Greenbelt. In fact, if you lay the two side by side and you just kind of change the words around a little bit, they look remarkably the same. So LEED has 6 categories instead of 7. But the last one there where it says innovation and design process, the innovation one for Greenbelt is already built into one of the other categories. But they're still talking about the same thing. Using some kind of a sustainable building site. We're concerned about how efficiently are we using water. That means how little water are we using. What kind of energy and atmosphere are we producing in that house? What kind of materials and resources are going into building that house? And in particular, the environmental indoor quality. And then LEED has this one called the design process. LEED just had a competition here in Grand Rapids for a converting, CompuWare? CompreNew. Converting CompreNew's building into a LEED certified building. And they threw this competition out to actually to schools and private industry to see who could come up with the best design for that conversion. And it was interesting. All these schools participated, and I think only 2 private companies or individuals participated, and one of them won it, right? Yeah. So that's another way that they promote the whole process of trying to get green. We're doing the same at the college here. We have an architecture department, and that architecture department has been very traditional. It has not had any green building courses or any green building activities in it. And I've been working with the instructor quite a bit because he teaches out at the MTech now, has some of his classes there. And he is going to take our LEED Habitat Home class this fall as a student. And he's doing that so he can gain the first-hand experience to create a green building architecture course to put into our curriculum here. So that's another positive. Okay, so Energy Star is one probably most people are familiar with more than any other because every time you go to the Home Depot or Lowe's or any of the big box stores, you see Energy Star stickers plastered all over appliances. And that's really where Energy Star started, was through the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Energy kind of coming together and saying we really need to have some standards about how these appliances that we use in our homes are being constructed and how much energy they're using, how much water they're using, and set some standards and some goals and try and make these things more efficient. So that's where Energy Star started off. But a few years after Energy Star got going, they decided that they would create a list of standards for homes. They're called Energy Star Homes, and we'll look at their list here in just a minute. So Energy Star is really about the products that go into that house and the house itself. The bottom one here where it says provides easy to use home and building assessment tools. I passed out to everybody, you should have picked it up out there, a list of green building websites. And all these organizations I'm talking about, they're on that website list. If you go on there, you can take and analyze any appliance in terms of how much does it cost you initially, how much energy is it using, how much water is it using, how much does it cost you per year to have that appliance, and then over here is a, quote, energy efficient model, and how much would it cost you in that same year period of time, and how long will it take you to pay back buying that better appliance. And it's an interesting one to look at. It's an easy calculator. So this is the Energy Star checklist. Effective insulation, and there's all kinds of standards on there what effective insulation is, how much insulation you have to have in the sidewalls and the roof, on the foundation. The standard for high performance windows, we were talking here earlier about, it's almost to the point you can't buy a high performance window. I mean, not buy a high performance window. I mean, virtually all windows being sold now are that way. They become dual pane, low E, argon filled, very high R value windows. They have standards for how tightly you construct that house and how the ductwork inside that house is constructed. They also have standards for heating, air conditioning. This is probably the biggest area that we have the most difficulty with our habitat homes. When in the past, most homes, to spec out the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning unit for it, you would just usually calculate the square footage of that house. And then there was this formula that you threw at it, and it said, well, based on the fact this house has 1,000 square feet, you need a heating, air conditioning, ventilation system that produces this many BTUs of heat or this amount of air conditioning. Didn't take into consideration anything else about that house, only the square footage of it, which, by the way, is still the way probably 90% of all houses are spec'd for heating and air conditioning units. So when the standards came along for energy efficiency, everybody said, well, wait a minute, that's not comparing apples to apples. The houses we're building over here that are greenhouses have better insulation, they have better windows, they have smaller square footage, they're passive solar gain, they're shaded by natural foliage around the house. We need a different formula for calculating that. So there's a formula out there called the manual J calculation, which is relatively complex to do, but it'll come up with a much, much more realistic figure for you of what you need in that house. When we build our habitat homes, that figure comes out usually for the heating unit at about 35,000 BTUs. Anybody know what the average house is? It's a lot more. Like, how much lot more? How much? 120, that's pretty high. That's somewhere between 80 and 100,000 is typical of a heating unit. We have been unable to buy 35,000 BTU heaters for these houses. We've actually had to buy 45,000 BTUs because that's the smallest one the manufacturers were producing at the time. They're now starting to produce smaller ones. That's just an indication of how different it can be if you make that calculation on your heating and ventilation loads based on the performance of the house as opposed to just based on the square footage of the house. Lighting and appliances, I'm sure we've all seen, again, you go into Lowe's or any of the stores like that and you'll see washers and, not dryers, but you'll see washers and dishwashers. Now you see battery chargers. I just was looking at a list for Energy Star now. I mean, it's about this long of products that Energy Star now certifies, including lighting fixtures. Not that I'm aware of. There's another. I'm not aware of it. Anybody know of it? That's just for the duct work? Yeah. Yeah, Manual J, I think, is the standard for all the rating systems I know of. It's, yep. I got with our HVAC department here about 6 months ago, and I asked them if they taught Manual J calculations within our own HVAC department. They do not. And then I asked them who in this area if I wanted to build a house and I wanted to get a manual J calculation done, how many HVAC contractors in the Grand Rapids area know how to do that? Any guesses? Close to zero, 5% maybe. So I said, well, how do we get manual J calculations done when somebody wants to build a Greenbelt home? And apparently it's being done through the distributors. And the distributors have somebody on their staff who know how to do the manual J calculations, and then they charge the contractors for that service. But there are very, very few people around that can do that. And I think that's another area we need to work on big time if we're going to get Greenbelt in any larger numbers. Yeah, it does. I've heard many stories of trying to convince local building inspectors that a 35 or 45,000 BTU heating unit is sufficient. You know, they've never seen that before. They see houses with 80 to 100,000 BTU units in them for houses that size every day of the week, and then along comes this builder and says, well, I built this house so tight and so well insulated that I don't need that big of a furnace in it. And it's very difficult to get them to buy into it. And you got to sell them. You got to get one of them to say, oh, we'll try it. We'll take a look at it. We'll see what it does.
That's an ongoing problem in building. Getting the local authorities to say, yeah, that's acceptable.
Well, I think anytime you make a change like that, there's always resistance to it at first by somebody. And eventually you get somebody who's willing to take a chance, and you get the evidence to show them that it really works. Our Habitat homes, right now they're running about $5,000 more to build a Habitat home to a LEED certification standard, silver standard, than a almost identical home that's not built to that standard. It's really nice because with Habitat, the houses are almost spec houses. So this one was built to a LEED standard, and the one 2 blocks down the road was not, but it's almost identical in size and shape and configuration. And so you can compare the heating bills. And right now, we built 4 LEED certified Habitat homes, and they're running about $1,200 a year less on utility bills. So you got a $5,000 initial investment, you're getting it back in 4.5 years. Most people would jump on that. To us, it's all materials. Our labor is free, student labor. Right. Habitat home.
Now you're putting in an HRV system, or you're putting in, you're adding things that you didn't normally put into a Habitat.
I'm not following you. Are we?
You're adding some features to the Habitat home to meet the LEED standard
Right.
that you normally would not have put in.
Right. And that's where the $5,000 is coming from.
But to take an average consumer's home and say the extra cost to make it a LEED or Moses home, it's not $5,000.
Is not?
It is not. It's about $1,500 actually.
Really?
So, but for the Habitat homes, of course, you always go bare minimum, you know,
I'm throwing out the 5,000.
recovery, ventilation system, or any of that. So, of course, that.
We're throwing in on that about $3,500 in materials and about $1,500 for the LEED rating process, actually. So,
So it's not a would an uncertified Habitat home not have a 90% loss efficiency heating system?
probably.
So that extra cost of the efficiency of the heating system is part of the extra cost of your Habitat home, for example?
Part of it's the extra insulation. the fact that we use energy heal trusses, the fact that we insulate the foundations, the fact that we seal and caulk every possible seam in that structure, which would be a labor factor to most people, not so much to us. We're using all Energy Star appliances, all Energy Star lighting in that house. Yeah. What's that? It's a big step.
I've been building for 20 some years. I'll talk with you later.
I'll take that.
Along the Habitat front, Habitat, the Wege Foundation recently gave us $65,000 to build the next Habitat home to a gold standard. And I was just at a meeting where the West Michigan Environmental Action Council just gave Habitat a grant to build a triplex, a 3-family green home that I'm trying to get us to build. I'm hoping we can. So Habitat is really making some strides, and again, it's here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. There's Habitat organizations from all over the country coming here to look at these Habitat LEED homes. It is big news to most of the Habitat organizations. Okay, so I think that's my last slide on that one. Yep. Okay, so we've looked at Energy Star, which is part of Greenbelt and part of LEED. If you go into the checklist for Greenbelt or the checklist for LEED, it'll say, like under energy efficiency, has to meet the Energy Star guidelines, blah, 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 blah. So Energy Star is kind of the base. And you could build a home just to the Energy Star standards and get an Energy Star sticker put on the house, and it would be certified as a green home under Energy Star. You could then also have that home certified by a rater for Greenbelt Michigan, which adds a few things to it, like the lot design, for example, and a little higher level certification, I would say. And you could get that certification added. Of course, it's going to take more money if the rater has to do more activities to rate that home. And then I would say the next step up from that is LEED. So in the kind of the hierarchy of things, right now I'd say we're at Energy Star, Greenbelt, LEED. It's also interesting to note that when LEED started, it started with commercial buildings. And LEED's big impact has been on the commercial end. But now LEED has LEED for homes, which is really similar to the Greenbelt standard for homes. And at the same time, Greenbelt has developed, I can't remember the name of it, Green Global, which is a rating system for commercial buildings. So they're both kind of going like this in the realm of commercial and residential. One started in commercial, one started in residential, and they're both kind of moving into each other's territory, so to speak. So it's really up to you as a builder, if you're a builder, or you as a home buyer, what rating system are you willing to accept? You know, you should probably take a look at all three of them and see which one you think meets the quality standards that you think should be in a home, and which one you think maybe has the most value to you and maybe to the future if you decide to sell that home. Because if you're going to move out of that home and sell it, that should be a selling point, an easy selling point. Okay? All right, anybody got any questions right at this moment? Yep.
You talked a lot about the energy savings and energy efficiency, but where we come in is more on the material side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Providing either FSC certified or SFC.
want to tell everybody what FSC stands for?
Forestry Stewardship Council or Sustainable Forest Council.
Yeah. Forestry Services Council, everybody heard that? And I don't know the other one. This is the other one that was just created, right? The C something. I can't remember them all either.
We've been focusing on the FSC at our company.
Okay.
So those qualify you for leads credits as well.
Correct.
Material side, correct?
Same with Greenbelt. Mm-hmm.
And then Greenville.
Yep. Let me show a slide here and we'll talk about that. Sometimes when I do Greenbelt training, we never get past this slide. We spend hours on this slide. And it's an interesting slide, excuse me, an interesting slide because it shows some of the basic features. Now, we're trying to get away from the idea that all green homes are exactly the same. You saw that rating scale has 7 different major areas, and you can score points in every area. In fact, you have to score points in every area. We want builders to look at this and home buyers as a holistic system, and that you have to make points in every category, and you can't do just one thing and say, oh, I built a greenhouse. You have to be concerned about the lot design. You have to be concerned about the energy usage. You have to be concerned about the water usage. Well, let's just take a look at some of these features here, and I want to talk about what he was talking about here in a minute ago. No, it doesn't show it on here. Recycled wood products and composites over here on the far right. There's several ways you can score points in all these systems. And one of them is that you use recycled products, or you use products that are made from, like the FSC, where it's guaranteed that it came from new growth forest. It didn't come from a forest that was there for 200 years and we went in and clear cut it and just produced lumber and stripped the land. It has to be in a managed forestry plan. And that lumber is coming from a managed forest in some way. That will score you points. It will score you points, more points, if that was produced locally. Now, what do you think local means?
100 or 500 miles.
Right, 500-mile radius. Okay. So that's considered to be local. So if we're getting lumber from a managed forest that is within 500 miles of our locale where we're building a house, we will score more points for it. Or if we're buying from a supplier who happens to be within that 500-mile radius, we will get points for it. Okay? And you'll get more points if you know where your products came from. So it's not just how the house is built. It's also the materials that are being used in that house. Let's look at some of the other ones here. If that house has Energy Star appliances and lighting fixtures, you will score points. All these systems. If you use pre-assembled engineered wood systems, now this is under Greenbelt more than LEED, you will score points for using these engineered pre-built lumber systems. Anybody going to take a guess as to why you get points for that? Use less wood. Theoretically. Theoretically, if I set up a factory and I'm running wall panels down that factory like in an assembly line process, I can buy lumber and cut it and assemble it with less waste. Now, my only concern is that the facility that's doing that, not all of them are necessarily using new growth lumber. Not all of them are necessarily using low VOC glue and sealants when they do that construction. But we're starting to rate them on those bases also. So if you use, you know what VOC means? Volatile organic compounds. You can buy paint, sealant, glues, caulking that releases very little or no volatile organic compounds. And this is what contributes to a large extent to indoor air quality. When you buy most new carpeting or upholstery like this, it does what's called off-gassing for a long time after it was manufactured. And those volatile organic compounds are floating around in the air inside your house. And it's kind of doubly bad inside of greenhouses because we intentionally make those houses very tight so they're not leaking a lot of outside air into the house all the time. So if anything inside the house is off-gassing, it collects in the house. So we want to eliminate as much of that as possible. I told you I was at that LEED certified office building for Zealand Farm Services just a week ago. All the carpeting, all of the upholstery was all made out of soy fiber because they're big into soy. I mean, that's their whole thing over there, is growing soybeans and making biodiesel and vegetable oil that's healthier for you. And so they bought carpeting that was made out of soy. So. Properly sized mechanicals, we went over this with the manual J. Covered entryways. I'll give you a little thing here. Covered entryways, and well, they don't show it here. Let's put on their roof overhangs. I live in a 1920 farmhouse, and the roof on my house overhangs my sidewalls by 2 feet, all the way around the top of that house. And all my entryways are covered. There's no open entryways that have nothing above them. And people back, in my opinion, back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, in many ways already knew what it meant to build green, and we kind of lost it for a while, and we're kind of getting back to some of that. Because the notion that you don't let water run down the side of the building seems pretty elementary to most people when you explain that to them, but we build a lot of houses where the water runs off the roof and down the side of the building and does not run away from the foundation very effectively. So those large overhangs were put on houses like that for a reason. There's another reason that overhang is out there 2 feet. Shade. I have a 2-story house, and in the summertime, that overhang completely shades all the upstairs windows almost all the time. So why do we need so much air conditioning in this country? Most other countries don't have it, don't use it. One of the reasons is they build houses that don't require it. So that's one of the reasons. Another one is this one building with trees. My house has, on the south side, a maple tree that's probably that big around. And in the summertime, when that maple tree is leafed out, it's about 25 feet behind my back door. The whole southern end of my house is shaded all day long by that tree. When that tree defoliates, how about that one, in the fall, and the sun comes down to the southern angle, the winter angle, it shines through that tree and directly into all my south-facing windows in that house. Same is true all the way around the house. When I first moved out there, along the west side of my house, on the west side of my house is an open 20-acre field. So in the wintertime, you get these 30-mile-an-hour winds coming across those fields, and they just blast right at the house. So when I moved out there, I planted pine trees, and they were about that tall when I first moved there. I planted 4 rows of them, staggered rows, about 50 feet long. Those trees are now 25, 30 feet tall. And if you go out there in the wintertime and stand on the windward side of those trees, it is painful. The cold wind blowing across there with the snow across that field. And you walk around that row of the trees, between those trees and my house, and it is a marked difference in how much cold air is blasting directly against that house. But how many times do you see people go out in the middle of an open field and put up new houses? Happens all the time. And taking no advantage of natural protection that's there. So let's look at some other ones here we might not think are too green. There's some definitions of green that people object to. For example, let's try vinyl or cement siding. What's wrong with vinyl siding? What's that?
Embodied energy, it's not very recyclable, and it's not healthy to the manufacturers, the people who work with it.
Okay, it's not so much the vinyl itself when it's after it's been produced. It's a pretty stable compound. It really doesn't off-gas hardly at all after vinyl's been produced. But in the production process of vinyl, that's where the difficulty comes in. The manufacturers are working very hard on trying to make that as green as possible. But so you have this product, this vinyl, synthetic material, man-made material, and you can look at it two ways. You can put it on the outside of your house and it'll outlast painted wood 10 to 1. So how green is it to be going out there and slopping paint on your house every 2-3 years compared to putting vinyl up there once and having it go for many, many years? There's always trade-offs in the whole green process. And what is a green product may not have been a green process in making it. And you got to kind of balance those out and say, well, I can live with some of the pollution that we may have created over here in the production of this because it'll offset it in the long run over here in the performance of this product. And at the same time, let's work on, can we make that better? I'll give you an example. It's womanized lumber. I just spent the whole day trying to find a substitute for womanized poles. There isn't one, at least not right now. However, what was removed from the womanizing process just recently? Arsenic. Okay, we used to make womanized lumber using arsenic as one of the primary ingredients. And if you bought womanized lumber 5 years ago, it would be really a dark green. It would just be, in many cases, just oozing liquid out of it when you get it from the store. And it's estimated that those older womanized lumber like that will leach arsenic into the ground for 15 years before it actually doesn't have anything left in it to leach out. The new womanized lumber, which has been around for a couple years now, has no arsenic in it. So they're getting better at it. It's still not a perfect product. There's still some things in there you might not want to stick in the ground. But what's that? Yeah. Yeah, you can't find it. And then somebody once said, well, you know, you could use creosote lumber. And I'm going, oh, yeah, that's better. Let's put, you know, the telephone poles and the railroad ties that have been soaked in essentially tar oil for how long and stick those in the ground. So, the cement siding, again, goes back to older farmhouses. I don't know if you ever remember the shingles that were on old farmhouses were actually made out of cement, thin, 1/4 inch or so. They break hard in your hand, but they lasted a long time. What's that? Yeah. Cement siding has become popular again. There's some objection to the amount of carbon that's released in the cement manufacturing process. So again, it's a trade-off. You know, we might release a little more carbon over here to build cement siding, but then over here is the finished house, and we don't have to touch it for 30 years. So which is better? Those are tough trade-offs sometimes. Yep. That's one of the directions they're moving, is to use more fly ash and less Portland cement. There are alternatives to everything. A couple of one on here. The one on the bottom, insulated foundations. you go to any new home site, you'll see that they'll pour the walls, standard walls, not your forms. Standard walls, they'll pour the wall, take the forms off, spray some black tar on the outside of the concrete to waterproof it, and backfill it. And then you got about 2 foot of that exposed concrete wall sticking up above the ground, and then the foundation of the house. It is estimated that a home built like that is losing between 20 and 30% of all the heat put into it out through that 2 foot exposed portion of that foundation wall. And it's a simple matter to insulate them. So you can gain a lot of points easily, and it's a big hit area by just putting insulation. I prefer on the outside. Some people insulate them on the inside. Where? The floor joists? Engineered floor joists, you mean? Yeah, typically. Yes, it is. Under Greenville, it is.
I have practical experience with that in a sense. I had a home with a fire in the basement. There were $65,000 worth of damage, but you couldn't even tell that there's been a fire by looking at the outside of the house. It looked like smoke.
Mm-hmm.
Fire chief came over and said, if you had had composite floor joists, your entire home would have been in the basement
Because the glue burns.
because of lack of firing system.
Mm-hmm.
How does that fit in? Has that, do you agree with that, or was it the case, or is it still the case?
Well, it's another one of these trade-off areas. Everybody know what engineered floor joists are? Take a 2x2 roughly, and then you, in the center of it, use OSB or particle board to make the ridge in between the two. And they use less wood, and they are stronger, and they weigh less, and they're dimensionally very stable. It means they're not twisted and warped and all that. However, the glue that goes into making OSB board is not the best stuff in the world. There's a lot of formaldehyde in it, for one thing. Now again, you can see now in the marketplace that there is particle board and OSB board that is being sold that has low VOC glue in it. That doesn't off-gas like that. It's not as flammable as some of the stuff that's been built, but it probably is more flammable. While you're on that subject, if you're going to take on the foundation of this house and sheath it in 1 or 2 inch polystyrene, what's the fire value of polystyrene that's unprotected like that? What is the gas off-gassing when it melts or burns? It's nasty stuff, terrible stuff. But its insulating value when it's on the house is very high. Yeah?
So you have no particle board up on the roof there. Would that be, so I take it that's, we're going to lose points or not get points if we have particle board on the roof?
Everybody objects to that one. I think what they're saying on that one is they mean there's a difference between particle board and OSB board. And some people, when they just look at them, they go, oh, it's just a bunch of wood chips that have been mixed with glue and smushed together and heated up. OSB strand board is much stronger than particle board. And if you put particle board up there, it's going to warp, and if it gets wet in any way, it loses all of its strength. So I think that's what they mean by that one up there.
What about the durable? What would get
They're looking at shingles that have 40 to 50 year lifespans at a minimum, or using metal roofing, or the new metal shingles, or the cement type shingles. I've seen some that are made out of glass now. They recycle glass and make shingles out of glass. On our lead homes, we're using 1 inch, and that will get you a rating on that. I'd like to see 2 inches. It's minimal. You just have to design in that extra thickness sticking out on the sidewall. You know, if you're going to sheath the whole house in 2 inches, then you got a smooth sidewall. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. can I help you with?
So, am I hearing this right that basically we have a system where there's a lot of criteria in each of the categories?
Yep.
And I could be strong in these couple of categories, strong areas or categories, or whatever. I could have several. I could get several points in this area and only maybe one in this area. So I could look at my house and see, and not necessarily fix all the weak areas, but if I have strong areas on the other hand.
You mean an existing house or a new house?
An existing house.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up.
An existing house here.
Well, because both Lead and Greenville are developing standards for existing homes.
But they don't have them yet.
Well, is Leeds out? No. Greenbelt's is supposed to be out here in a month or so. We're in the last phases of determining what's going to. You know what? It's interesting. What we've decided to add into that is that they're barrier-free as a green category, which I think is good.
Strengths in some areas and weaknesses in others, and that can balance it out.
You can balance it out. You can look at any of the things that we're talking about here about new homes. And you can go back and look at your older home and say, where are the weaknesses in this? And there are lots of energy auditors around who can come in and do an audit of your home, and they can pinpoint for you exactly where your house might be losing the most amount of heat. You can take a thermal imaging camera and take a picture of your house, and it'll show, around the windows you'll see red because that's where it's leaking heat, around the doors, around the foundation, around the edge of the roof where there's the least amount of insulation. And what can you do to improve the overall performance of that house? Look at your windows. I just replaced all the windows in my 1920 farmhouse. Those were the original windows in that house. Let me tell you, that's the biggest change I ever made to that house, was putting new high-performance windows in it. That was worth every penny I ever spent. Yeah.
Testing criteria for Greenville and for Lead, I would imagine they're all like Energy Star, you have to blower door test.
Yeah, blower door test.
Maybe Duck Blasters with the Greenville or also.
What's that?
Lead has 4 mandatory tests. The blower door test, duct blaster test, air infiltration meter, blah, blah. There are 4 mandatory and there are 5 optional, depending on which choice you make. I also wanted to say that in each category, there are mandatory measures in each category for each home, and then a lot of options you can choose.
Yeah.
And that's related to 4.
Same with Greenville. You have to score a minimum number in. We'll talk about the blower door test real quickly here. I don't know how much longer we're going to go here, but the blower door test is essentially you take this big fan and you put it in the door of the house and you seal it off very tightly, and you blow a controlled amount of air either into the house or out of the house, and you measure how much air is leaking through that house. How much will it draw out of the house in a certain period of time? A typical home will leak about 1,500 cubic feet of air per minute or hour. I don't remember which. Anybody help me on that one? Is it a minute?
Seems like cubic feet per minute. That's
Cubic feet per minute is what we're measuring on a blower door test?
writing instead of listening.
I think it is. Our lead homes are all running a blower door test right now, under 500. A third of what a standard home leaks. Now the problem is that once you build a house so tight like that, that it's not leaking air through the windows and the cracks and the doors and everything else, how do you get enough fresh air into that house for the occupants? You actually have to engineer in that airflow coming back into the house. And we do it with what are called heat exchangers. So you have a tube hooked up to the outside that's drawing cold air in at the same time that you're blowing warm air actually out. And they pass past each other, not molecule to molecule, but air around a tube, hot air inside one tube, cold air on the outside. And we exchange that heat. So we're not blowing the heat out of the house, we're just blowing the stagnant air out of the house and drawing fresh air back in. Those add expense. Quite a bit of expense sometimes. So. All right, we got 10 minutes. I have about a 10-minute film of our lead home being built. Would you like to see that as opposed to hear me talk and hear somebody else talk and show how they're building this LEED habitat home and all the things they're doing to it? That'd be fine. Any questions before I do it? Never got an answer. I don't know the answer to that. Do you know?
I understand that you guys Greenbelt Council is working with farmers
He said that there is sound on this one, and he said he had the sound hooked up on this, but I haven't tried running it yet, so let's see if that works. I don't know where the volume is set on this, by the way. Yeah, we build stuff. No, we're not getting any sound here. Nope. All right, let's see if we can get this little bugger over here. Well, I can hear it here. But
the typical house their energy or heat loss out the foundation. So by doing the full line, we have to cut that percentage down tremendously. This system here, putting the styrofoam on around the outside, we are trying to keep it as a continuous thermal break from the outside to the inside. So because of the break level here, we have to try to keep units with a pattern exposed. That's what you see down this one side here.
that's true.
As you can see, we've come a long way.
Yes.
We've got the lower walls built.
That's insulated below the foundation, too.
We're working right now on the last front wall, and we are building the center wall right now, too. At our corners, we take and we turn a 2x4 sideways here so we can get insulation back in here also. Otherwise, the way they used to do them, they would block them up. They'd be solid sometimes they'd be hollows, and they would get dead airspace, which would cause air to move around in there, and you could get mold in your corners. This way we can get full insulation in the corners. Another part of LEED homes is trying to be conservative on how we use our wood. We want to not put wood in that's not necessary. In the older days, we used to put extra cripples in at each end of our sills and at our headers. Here we didn't put them in because every time we put a piece of wood in, it's a heat loss. We can't insulate it as good as if we could get insulation in there. After we got done with our sealant package, we foamed our penetrations. We went around and we caulked the floors and caulked everything right up. And at that point, we had everything pretty well sealed up. And then we were ready for insulation. They came in and blew a cellulose insulation, which is a very recyclable green product. This is made from recycled newspapers and phone books. We put that in our wall. It packs in very nice and fills every part of the cavities and makes a very tight fit. Once we were inside here, we had to get our mechanicals done. We do our heating, plumbing, electric. But with our heating, we had to change a few things here to get to comply with the LEED program. We had to add tape to our joints of our ductwork to seal them up, and we had to caulk our cold air bays to seal them up. We don't want to get contaminants from other parts of the house spread out through the whole house, or dust and dirt that they could pick up through different leaks in the ductwork. And we want to keep the house healthy and as environmentally friendly as possible. So we want to really concentrate on those kinds of things in this house. Now we're down in the basement of our lead home. Here we have a 90% gas furnace. This is a natural gas furnace. It's basically 10% more efficient than your average furnace. It is vented by a PVC pipe versus a Class B metal chimney. This pipe, we have two pipes. One's an exhaust and one's an intake. The intake brings the fresh air into the combustion, and it helps keep it more efficient. As you can see, the ductwork here has been caulked and taped. Again, that's to help keep everything sealed up and keep the heat where we need it and keep the contaminants out. On our house, we have all the hot runs all taped and sealed up. But this is something that is not done on the normal house today. Like this ductwork here, where it's untaped, all it is just our drive clips and S-clips, and you can get leakage at all the corners here. By taping this up, that seals all these corners and seals everything right up. Before we got here to install all the ductwork and the furnace, we had to go through and do what's called a manual J calculation to figure out what size furnace we needed. This furnace here is the smallest furnace that is made by the heating companies out there. They're eventually going to have to go and start developing some smaller size furnaces. As LEED becomes more popular, the houses will be more energy efficient, and for smaller houses, they'll need smaller furnaces. Over here we have a 40-gallon hot water heater. This is a natural gas. It is a power vented system, and by saying that, I mean this here system is very efficient. It does not have a metal chimney. It has a plastic chimney. It is vented with a fan system. It plugs into the wall, so it means it's electronic fired. This is an instant electronic ignition. It does not have a standing pilot that's burning gas all the time. By being an energy efficient system here and having a PVC exhaust, that means the burner in here is much more energy efficient. It has to burn more of the gases. On all these LEED improvements that we've been doing, if you were to add up everything that we've done as far as cost, the hot water heater, the furnace, the insulations, the energy framing that we've done, you could spend an extra of $1,500 to maybe $3,000 depending on how involved you've got with it. There's a lot of other systems you can do in the homes to make them more energy efficient and more healthier. But that seems to be kind of a rule of thumb for the average home out there. The 13-watt compact fluorescents, which replace the equivalent to a 60-watt incandescent bulb, and so it should really save her quite a little bit on the electricity bill. And we've got some high efficiency appliances. We've got a gas range, and we've got, of course, all new appliances. So all the new appliances are much more energy efficient than the old appliances. Also, we have here is our low E argon windows. These are a thermal pane. They're double glass. They have the low E tin in them, which cuts out the ultraviolet rays, and it helps the R value, which is the resistance to heat loss, so that we get a much better rating on it for our testing when we did our blower door test. But also, we have added these blinds on, so in the winter she could close these down, and that'll work as a little insulating curtain. It's not a major insulating factor, but every little bit helps. We want to try to test the house to see how tight it was. So when they did this blower door test, they do a vacuum down on the house. They pull the pressure out to find out where the leaks are and how much leak there is. And in this case, on this house, we did what's called a 0.2 blower door test, which would be 0.2 air changes an hour. To be healthy, we want to be a 0.35. So we got the house pretty tight. So we did real well with our caulks and our sealants and stuff. So what we had to do was add a timer system to this bathroom fan. And what that does will help draw the fresh air in from our intake vents on the house. Part of our trying to hit this LEED qualification is we have to be careful with our water conservation. And the part of it is our toilets. We want to make sure that they are water saver toilets. This is a 1.6 gallon flush, and we have 2 of them in the house to help conserve water. And we've done a few things with water here and there. We put water saver shower heads and water saver aerators on our faucets and stuff, so it cuts down the gallons per minute that these faucets put out. We have a programmable thermostat that is very homeowner friendly, very simple to set and program, so that she can set it down at night. If she wants to turn the heat down at night, it'll automatically do that for her. She just has to program that in of when they go to bed, when they get up in the morning, or if she goes to work, she can have it turned down at that point too. And all those little things will help save energy for her and save her some money. Outside here, we tried to take in a lot of things in account for the LEED program, again for water consumption, so it helps save her on her water bill. We've kept the lawn down in size so that there's not a lot of lawn to mow. We've done a lot of wood chipping and a lot of drought plants. Most of the wood chips, well, I'd say half the wood chips came right from here on site when they ground a big oak stump in the back. And 3/4 of the plants or more came from on site. They had a lot of daylilies and lily of the valley that we've transplanted around the house and along the fence. A lot of the rocks that we have put in here in our landscaping all came from off site. And all things, again, to save money and to save water.
Okay, that was all right. 10-minute quickie. Okay, day 30, which is when this session was supposed to end. If anybody would like to stay, I'd be willing to stay, and you can discuss anything you saw there or any other subjects about green building that you'd like to address.
You're looking at the marketplace and there's 100
several $100,000 homes, and there were several builders there who were also on that advisory committee, and they were all basically complaining about how bad the market is right now and that they don't have any work and that they're not selling any homes. But if you go look at the 3 or 4 primary green builders in the Grand Rapids area, they're all booked ahead 6 months to a year. They are not in the dumps like everybody else is in the building industry. And that's because they've been able to capitalize on the need that is out there and to help create that need and find kind of a niche in that market. Now eventually, if everybody finds that niche, the next niche is going to be building to the next higher standard of green. Instead of building a silver home, you would build a gold home and you would sell your company on that. And eventually we're just going to hopefully keep raising that bar until we're building homes that are called zero energy homes, homes that are even homes that put more energy back than they consume. And it is possible. It's pretty expensive to do, but it's not an impossibility. I can't honestly. Well, I'm not in an objective position to answer that. I would just say go back and look at the hierarchy that I explained before between what I think Energy Star certification means and what does Greenbelt certification mean and what does LEED certification mean. Which of those is the most highly respected? Which one has probably the most difficult standards? And look at the marketplace and compare that to if it costs $5,000 extra to build a LEED certified home and $3,000 extra to build a Greenbelt home, and you know your buyer is not going to opt for $5,000, then you don't have much of an option. You know, you got to balance the marketplace with the accrediting organizations that are out there and find your place that's going to fit the best. I can't answer that, honestly.
And I'm going to wrap this up and then invite anybody that would like to continue this discussion with Brian to finish up. So thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Let me point out the code for downstairs.
Oh, yeah.